Welcome to Foundations with Larisa Hovannisian, an unfiltered podcast where I explore the foundational principles of creators, entrepreneurs, scientists, public figures, and all around awesome people who make things happen. Welcome back to Foundations with Larisa Hovannisian. Today we're diving deep with Maria Titizian, powerhouse journalist, editor-in-chief of EVN Report, and one of the most trusted voices shaping Armenia's national dialogue. Maria doesn't just report the news. She dissects systems, decodes narratives, and demands accountability. In this episode, we get into the real foundations of truth-telling in fragile democracies, the battle to build civic consciousness through independent media, and the personal cost of documenting a nation's most painful chapters, when staying silent simply isn't an option. Maria, thank you so much for being with me today. You're a journalist, a social justice warrior. You speak up for, people and situations in ways that I think are very courageous and bold. What was the moment that sort of anchored your belief in journalism as a way of bringing about justice to the world?
I don't think there was, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I don't think there was an aha moment for me. To be honest, I just liked writing stories. I just liked being in the middle of the chaos, if you will. I always felt I wanted to convey the stories that were unfolding before us. And, just as a kid, I was an avid reader and I was writing all the time. So it wasn't so much about justice for me at the beginning. I didn't realize the depth or the need for it. Especially growing up in Canada, where everything is very sort of boring, for lack of a better word. There's no upheaval. And then I moved to Armenia.
Because you're originally from
Canada.
But you were born in Beirut,
I was
right?
born in Beirut.
Yeah.
I was a year and a half, 2 years old when we moved to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So my formative years I spent there. I only moved to Armenia in 2001. So, coming from a very stable, comfortable country to Armenia, that's, I think, when that thought started to formulate in my head. And there are critical moments in our contemporary history that I was a witness to and I reported on. And one of the most devastating in the beginning, because we had much devastation after that, was March 1 in 2008. Mm-hmm. That for me was when I saw the complexity of the situation, and I understood that as a journalist, because I was reporting on it. I was there the whole day when everything was going down. I realized that it's not just about coherence, it's about context and nuance that needs to be conveyed. But the turning point for me was in 2016, during the Sasnadzerer takeover of the police station. I've told this story many times, but it really was another big moment in my life as a journalist, because here we were in a situation where a group of armed men had taken over a police station, killing an officer, taking hostages. In any other country, people would have been in shock. People would have, been angry. But instead, we had thousands of people on the streets supporting these men. And everybody was live streaming. They were talking about it. They were reporting it. But nobody was asking the big question, why is this happening?
And why is there so much support?
Why is there so much support? So we didn't understand sort of the factors and the forces that were shaping our lives as we were living it. And that's, I think, for me, and, it was never conscious. Again, I operate in a weird state sometimes. I don't consciously do things. I just somehow do things that end up being right for me. And that's when I realized that the power of journalism to, I don't want to sound haughty, we don't bring about social justice. We report about it, we contextualize it, we demand it. And the power of journalism for me is that it's not only about reporting, it's educating, informing, uplifting, enlightening, helping people make choices in their lives that will impact not only themselves, but their communities and their country. But absolutely, it's a tool for social justice.
Yeah. And I think just for our audience, it's important to understand the historical period that we're talking about here, because, Armenia has lived through the fall of the Soviet Union,
the war, the energy crisis. It just
as you said, devastation after devastation.
It's never a moment.
Can you, and a lot of people ask me, why are you doing this podcast in English? And I always respond and say that I think we've talked to each other enough internally, and we've been siloed for so long, and it's time for the world to really understand who we are and what we're doing and what we're going through. And so, if you were to sort of describe in short, this situation that you're talking about with Sasnatsaret in 2016, where are we as a country at that point?
Oh, wow. I think the difficulty we have as Armenians is that our history is so long and so complicated that you can't just talk about an event in a vacuum, because there are so many things leading up to that event.
Correct. Yeah.
So then that's where we trip up, right? That's where we understand that we can't explain things in simple terms. The first Karabakh War, I do need to go back a little bit to explain this in a way that makes sense to me and in a way that could make sense to your listeners. So as the Soviet Union is collapsing, the Karabakh movement begins, right? And we have the Karabakh War, and it ends in 1994 with Armenia's victory, right? Fast forward 2016. So in all that time period, what did we do with that victory?
Nothing.
So one of the important things that I think that we need to do as journalists, as a society, as a civic society, as Armenians, is hold up a bloody mirror to our face and really take a good, hard look at what we did and what we didn't do. And more importantly, what we didn't do right.
That's very hard for us to do.
Yeah, we're not very good with that. So we have... And then we have years of negotiations. There's no peace at this point. We're living in the suspended, altered reality of no peace, no war. And, sometimes there's a flare-up and sometimes there's peace. And people, we were all lulled into this belief that the status quo was good enough, that it was going to hold, that it was going to be okay, and that Karabakh could develop to become, statelet. Armenia could develop in a state of blockade with predatory neighbors surrounding us to the east and to the west, with our options so limited. And then, the war veterans, I suppose, understood that this was the road to hell for us. And so they decided to take over a police station, and it was all about the negotiations and the Karabakh conundrum, if you will, of Artsakh. I still don't understand. I'll be very honest. I still don't understand how that happened, why that happened, and how people understood that they need to support them. I have to say this, Larisa, we don't talk about this enough, especially as diasporans. The Armenian people really know what's what. They really get it. I've gone off to perhaps a little bit off the deep end, but they really understand the processes that are taking place, and they know what to do oftentimes. So I don't know if I answered the question or not.
No, you did. And then you also talked about the 2008 incident in which civilians were killed by the former government in a peaceful protest. Can you, what switched for you? Because I also know that as a diasporan, we're raised in a very certain way to think about Armenia and the things that are happening here and the political groups that are here in certain ways, and a lot of it is nostalgia, and a lot of it is, cultural and traditional, and so, and I'm sure you were raised in a certain way too as a diasporan living in Canada. What was the switch? And I ask this because I am also a diasporan. I'm half Armenian, but I did not grow up in the diasporan bubble. I lived.
I did.
I lived in Russia primarily, and I had a couple of Armenian friends, but I didn't grow up speaking the language. I was sort of outside that whole thing of groups and different churches, and
So why do we need to have so many churches?
yeah.
Right?
I mean, I realized this way later, way later. Like when I actually started building Teach for Armenia, that's when it like dawned on me. What as a diasporan who grew up, I guess, in a more traditional way, what was the switch for you in 2008? What happened there?
I don't know that I switched in 2008. I think it was a very devastating moment.
Or the trigger, I guess. Maybe that's the better way to put it.
Yeah. Again, you bring your personal history, your personal experience to any job that you do. And as a journalist, that's even more enlightened, if you will. Here I was coming from, I'd moved in 2001. This is 2008. I've been working as a journalist now in Armenia for about 5 years. And I understand the political instability, and I understood the challenges of the country by that time. I'm still learning, by the way, even after 24 years. I will never deign to say that I understand Armenia completely or the Armenian people.
But that's why you're great.
Oh, I don't know. But, yeah. When I saw the tanks rolling down Apovian Street when they called for a state of emergency that night, after people had already been injured, and that's when I physically collapsed on the street on Tumanian with my 16-year-old son at the time, because I couldn't believe this was happening to my country. I couldn't believe, because we grew up in the diaspora, at least I did, with this notion that, or my dad instilled in me, Armenians are smarter, brighter, we tend to be more, we understand solidarity, we fight the good cause, the good fight, we don't take arms against each other. So this was... To witness that was devastating for me, absolutely, because all of a sudden it ruptured everything that I thought to be true about who we were as a people, and to see, and by the end of that, by the following morning, 10 people had been killed. 10 people for a country like Armenia is a lot. And I remember the next day taking my children down because they were terrified of what had happened, taking them down to see for themselves the aftermath of that, for them to understand that this is also part of our reality. This is also part of who we are. But for me, that was a big change. That showed me the vulnerability of our society. It showed me the callousness, if you will, of governments, of dispersing a peaceful protest in the way that they did, and then being in the middle of thousands of people protesting. That kind of power was overwhelming for me. I've gotten much better at it.
Handling the overwhelmingness of things.
Yeah. I handle things much better now, and I think that comes with age and experience, and just developing a thicker skin, because we don't have a choice.
Right.
We either walk away. I don't mean physically walk away. We walk away from seeing or bearing witness to that awful truths that we have to face sometimes. But for me, as a journalist especially, that's when I realized how important it was. Because if you remember, well, you don't remember. You're too young probably, but back then, the state of emergency, and the press was not allowed to report anything except what the government was saying.
Well, yeah.
And I was working at the Armenian Report at the time. We were a U.S.-based news organization. Our editor had conveniently left for the States, and I was there in the office alone, and somebody from what we call the KGB comes and tells me that, you can't publish what you want. And I was all bravado. And I said, no, of course we can. We're a U.S.-based publication. We're not, we don't have to follow those regulations. But after he left, I ran to the bathroom. I mean, that's how nervous I was. Because again, understanding where I came from, these were very challenging moments for me.
You decided to move.
Yes.
At the weirdest time possible.
Yes. Well,
what, I mean,
was it? Is it ever
I mean,
right
it
time?
Was. Yeah. I think now is the nicer time.
I always tell people, if you ever complain about anything. Just talk to my kids.
I mean, you moved in 2001.
Yeah.
Armenia had been independent for
10 years.
10 years at that point. Severely blockaded economy, horrible exodus of people. And then you're coming back, or you're
I'm not coming
you're
back.
moving.
I'm moving.
You're moving. Yeah.
I'm not
for the
even a
first
repat,
time.
really. What does that even mean?
I
But
don't know
anyway,
anymore.
yeah.
Yes. But you're
Not
moving
from here.
You're
Yeah.
moving to Armenia with your husband. You're moving with your
2 kids.
2 kids already.
12 and 9.
And then, I mean, they were probably really mad at you.
Oh, God, they hated me. Yeah, they really hated me. Well, my son hated me more in the beginning, and then I think my daughter hated me more halfway through, and now they love it. So,
And what made you, what pushed you towards that decision?
So, again, I've told this story many times, but in 1988, I was working at the Zorian Institute in Toronto. And somehow we got these beta tapes. I don't know if people remember the VHS or the beta tapes of something happening in Armenia. And at that time, you have to remember, in 1988, I'm married. Never went to Armenian school. Know a little bit of Armenian history, but
Yeah.
you could take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you where Qarabağ was on a map. I couldn't, I'm being very honest. So 1988, bring these tapes home, put it in the machine, and I'm watching. There's like hundreds of thousands of people in Yerevan chanting Miatsum, unification. And of course, did a very quick thing, and I understood what was happening. And so I turned to my husband and I said, look, something's happening in Armenia. We got to go.
Of course.
But, so, for me, I always say I'm a Cold War baby, right? So I grew up going to school, being taught about bunkers, and they would show us films of nuclear fallout, what happens if a nuclear bomb happens. It's the Cold War, right? I mean, nobody thought the Soviet Union was going to collapse. Armenia was, Soviet Armenia. I didn't have any connections to it. Other than the fact that my parents had family who had repatriated in the 40s. But I know something's happening in my country, and I just want to be part of it.
My country.
My country.
My country.
Yes.
That's something that I don't always hear.
It's always been mine.
Mm-hmm. And where does that come from?
I don't know.
Just innate.
Yeah, I think so, very much. So in 1991, my husband came because he was going to scope it out, and we're going to move.
So he was on board.
Yeah.
He was on board with you. You.
At that point, yeah. It took about it.
At that point,
Anyway,
yeah.
so it was the 1991 February, before independence. So he came to figure out if we could move. Coldest winter on record. There's no water, there's no heating, there's no electricity. He comes back, and by that time we had my eldest daughter, and he said it's too soon for us. I don't think he was afraid that I wouldn't be able to handle it. And then in 1998, I came for the very first time. Very first time. I wasn't able to come because then I had another kid in between and, life. So I came and I didn't want to go back. I was at the airport. If there was a phone, if there were cell phones, if there was a phone, I was going to call and say, get the kids and come. I'm not coming back. I'm serious. I'm insane. And I remember the plane landing in Toronto after spending, 2 weeks in Armenia in 1998, thinking, I don't belong here. And then
Toronto.
Yeah. In 2001, we moved. It was, the decision to move was really easy.
It's the...
Getting here.
Okay.
It's the getting here. It's the...
People probably didn't understand what you were doing.
No, nobody did. If you saw the scene at the airport of my family...
I can imagine.
No, you can't. So there's I think 40 or 50 people. And it's this huge semicircle. And I start at one end and my husband on the other end and the kids or whatever. And we're saying our goodbyes and everyone's crying. And somebody, it's ridiculous. Somebody yells out, Tebi Hayrenik, toward the homeland. And it's I said, if people saw that, they would think we were going somewhere where another plane wasn't going to land anymore. It's just, but 2001, we had dial-up. We didn't have the ability to call or be, FaceTiming people.
It's a whole other experience, I think.
So then landing in Armenia, I think I was in shock for about 2 years. And sometimes I questioned.
Okay, that was going to be my next
Yeah,
question.
I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it. It was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. There were some nights where I was lying in bed thinking, what the hell did we do? Like, what did we do? Right? We had to put our kids in school. And when I saw the condition of the school, then, they get lost on the school bus. And I couldn't. They had a really hard time. Like, imagine doing maths in Armenian or biology in Armenian. I was like desperate, calling people up, trying to figure out how to handle it. And culturally, there's a huge difference. Huge. And of course, there were people who welcomed us with open arms, and there were other people who said, oh, you have your Canadian passport in your back pocket. You'll take off at the first opportunity. Well, I guess I proved them wrong, but
yeah, you're still here.
I'm still here.
You're still chugging along.
Still chugging along. Wouldn't have it any other way.
You have been on the ground witnessing and reporting on some of Armenia's most difficult moments. What kept you sane and grounded through the turbulence?
I'm not sane or grounded.
Okay.
I have to say that.
Good to know.
It has been the honor of my life. Really the honor of my life to have that opportunity to do that, to bear witness. And that's the one thing I always told my children, in moments where there was a lot of frustration, I would say, you guys are bearing witness to the empowerment, to the development of a new country. That's the greatest gift as a mother I could give you. Although you might not appreciate it right now.
You will one day.
You will one day. But to have to be a witness to history as it's unfolding, to a country that's mine, to a place where I don't belong 100%. Mm-hmm. I don't belong 100% anywhere. I don't think anybody belongs anywhere. You belong to yourself. But somewhere where I love with such passion. I don't know where it comes from, to be honest. I don't know why I continue loving it despite all of those challenges that you mentioned. But I think it's what keeps me grounded are my kids and now my grandchildren, mm-hmm. 3 of them.
3 boys.
3 boys.
Keeping you busy, I'm sure.
But it's also the fact that I believe in this country. I believe in our people. I believe, and not in the greatness of the Armenian nation, all of that. No, I just believe that people want to live a dignified life. And how difficult is it to do that for 3 million people? Mm-hmm. What is it that we're doing wrong? What is it that we can course correct? And how can we become a country that we are proud of? But whatever happens, I'm still proud. With war and displacement and everything and all the horrific things that we've had to experience the last decade, I still am very proud of my country.
Mm-hmm. I think something you said really stuck with me. It's this, I've witnessed it and I've written about it and I've gotten a lot of crap for it from people. But
welcome to my world.
it's our inability to, as you said, put a mirror to ourselves and say, okay, like, how have I contributed to this? What has my mistake been? How have I been complacent? Mm-hmm. What is the learning that I can do as a person? What is learning that we can do as a people? It's so incredibly hard.
Yes. So
why?
So I was having dinner one time with an ambassador who shall remain nameless, and she said to me, Maria, you Armenians, first of all, I hate that, you Armenians are so emotional. I thought, what is she talking about? And I was so insulted, right? I said, we're not emotional. What are you talking about? We are. We are ridiculously emotional. We are ridiculously irrational. We tend to be intellectually lazy. We tend to believe that the world has to come and save the Armenian people. We believe that the world owes us something. We are the first Christian nation on the planet. We were the first people in the 20th century to experience genocide. We were this, we were that. Tell me who we are today. We romanticize who we are and where we belong in the world. We romanticize this notion of, I have a friend who many years ago was in Armenia, and she had gone, it was January 1st, the day after New Year's Eve, and she's at Sasuntsitavit train station, and there's this old woman selling something, and she realizes my friend is from Canada. She goes, oh, do you know, the Armenian people are the greatest people on the planet. We have the best literature, the best art, the best music. And my friend said, does she really believe that? I go, just let her be, because that's how she wants to be. We have to be very honest about who we are, what we've done, and really tailor our expectations to our capabilities. And if we don't have those capabilities, understand what those capabilities need to be and how do we develop them. Because, sitting around, in your basement in Glendale or in your apartment in Montreal or wherever it happens to be and be a keyboard warrior is the easiest thing you can do. Coming to Armenia and treating it like your Disneyland is the easiest thing you can do. Coming to Armenia and taking part in Vartevar and, saying, oh my God, it's so cool, and going to the bars and going to all the historic places. This is all wonderful. Everybody should do that. But everybody needs to stop for 1 second and say, okay, there's this little place, a little piece of geography that we have in a very complex neighborhood, surrounded, like I said earlier, by predatory neighbors, right? With very few resources. How do we live? How do we continue to exist? But we don't do that. We just, we don't want to look at our shortcomings. And what are our shortcomings? Irrational, emotional, overly romanticizing our realities, overestimating our capabilities, and underestimating what we can become if we just correct the course that we're on. And of course, this is, sounds all wonderful, and it's not easy to do, but teach for Armenia, education, right? This is the most important thing. We have to recalibrate how we see ourselves in the world. And there are a lot of things that fill me with rage on a daily basis, absolute blinding rage. How is this possible? From the simplest thing, why is it that in front of my building 3 times a year, they have to dig a long-ass hole to change a pipe? 3 times a year. Why can't we plan? Why can't we look at, think of developing ourselves in terms of systems? How do we improve these things? But no, we just complain and we point fingers and we, there's such a lack of compassion sometimes. Yeah, so my rage sometimes takes over. So.
But the thing is, I completely agree with you. I recently wrote an article about how mediocrity is killing Armenia.
Oh, did you read my mind?
Yeah. You should look at the comments there.
Why?
Because, most of them, I think people agree, especially folks who live here and don't operate in these islands of excellence, but actually see what's happening overall as a trend. And then there are people who have, essentially accused me of not being a good enough Armenian or patriot.
What does that even mean?
And I just want to say to them,
but what does that mean?
I don't even know.
Oh,
You're shedding bad light on our country.
Why?
This is this is love. I love Armenia.
Of course.
So much. More than you probably, and I'm going to confidently say that. Because I see the issue. I think there are plenty of ways for us to get better fast. As you said, we're a 3 million, country. If we can recognize what these issues are and agree to them and not feel bad about it, because it's almost like this analogy is, it's like, your body is sick. And instead of just saying, oh, no, I'm great, you're saying, no, there are certain things that I need to see a doctor for, get medicine for, have a better lifestyle so I can be healthy. And I think Armenia needs people who love it enough to be open about the current situation that our country finds itself in and identify these issues and solve them. And they are solvable. They're 100% solvable. It's not rocket science whatsoever. And I think the impact could be so fast because we're small, we're homogenous. We have a lot of things going for us, a lot of things going against us.
Sure.
But that's love. Like that is my expression of love. It's truth. It's honesty.
But that's what you do with your children, right? You love them unconditionally, but if they're doing something that's harmful to them or to somebody else, you sit down with them and you explain to them that, this behavior has to change, or this is how you have to see the world. We had published an article a few years ago based on a report by UNICEF and local, not only international experts, but with local experts as well. And it was about sexual abuse against children in Armenia. Okay? How many cases there were, how the state was trying to mitigate these things. Not mitigate, unfortunately, abuse exists everywhere, not only in Armenia. So we published this report because I felt it was important for us to understand that there is child abuse in Armenia and there's sexual abuse. Not in the numbers. Obviously, Armenia is a very safe country. I've raised my children here. I know how safe it is and how much there is love toward children. But it's a country, right? You're going to have every kind of person. I can't tell you the amount of hate mail that we got from people saying, oh my God, how dare you? You're airing our dirty laundry. I come to Armenia every year with my children. They play out in in Opera Square. Nothing happens to them. Why are you doing this? So, that's just a small example of how we like to stick our head in the sand and not look at the really hard, prickly, challenging issues that we have. But coming back to mediocrity. So one of the reasons I started EVN Report was, well, there were many reasons, but one of them was I'm so tired of mediocrity. I want EVN Report, I want anything that we do as individuals, as a collective, whatever, to be competitive. I want EVN Report to be as good as The Atlantic or as The New Yorker. Why not? Why shouldn't we aspire to greatness? Why shouldn't we aspire to excellence, right? And we are so easy with vocinci, Maria, this vocinci or cigarelli. These two things drive me crazy. Like, cigarelli means it's not possible. Anything I would suggest, cigarelli. That's the default position. It's not possible to do until you prove them otherwise.
And then that becomes the standard.
Then that becomes the standard. What we need to do in Armenia is take these islands of excellence and connect them in ways that it starts trickling down and it's a societal change and not only an island anymore. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're so good at being mediocre at everything.
And I just don't think we have the luxury of affording that.
No, at all. We have to be excellent in everything that we do.
I agree. Per capita, we need to figure out
and we can be.
And we can be.
It's a behavioral thing and it's an attitude thing, I think. I also understand, look, with the older generation in Armenia, they've seen so much, they've experienced so much, they've gone through so many, uphill battles that they're tired and exhausted. But we shouldn't let that impact the younger generation, which is coming up, sees the world in a much different way.
Right. And, people assume that I don't know what I'm talking about half the time. But
you don't, actually. Can you just admit it?
So
I
don't.
Hold a mirror up to it.
I don't. But, through the last 10 years, Teach for Armenia has recruited thousands of people. Has interviewed them, has into staff, into our different programs. We've come into contact with the masses through our work. And what we're seeing is a declining trend, actually. Every year from the same, universities, from the same departments, from the same faculties, the students are great. They have a ton of potential. But their test scores and their overall knowledge
is declining.
Because of decisions that were made and gradually, added up to a full total decline. These decisions were made 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago maybe, and now we're seeing the consequences of that. And so the people are wonderful, but they themselves, they'll say that they know that they're graduating with these diplomas and they have foundational gaps in their learning. And so they really start closing these gaps when they're working, or they are enrolling themselves in these different, side courses, primarily outside of Armenia,
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Or fortunately, I don't know.
I think that we're now aware of it. So when we collaborate very closely with the Ministry of Education, and there is an awareness of this, and there's an openness to disclosing what those rates are, what these outcomes are. Next year, Armenia is going to participate, for example, in a numeracy and literacy exam, which is internationally recognized. And as the minister has said herself, we anticipate seeing some challenging things, but that's the first step to getting better.
But it's another myth, right? We're great. We love to build myths that Armenians are 98% literate, that we excel in that. I know that we excel in the natural sciences and the maths, and
maybe one day we did.
At one point, perhaps we did. But again, it's this mythology that we've created. Whether how strong our army is or how secure our borders are, to how educated we are. Again, holding up a mirror to our faces, and we need to be talking about this without fear. Without fear, we need to say that education system in Armenia today, I don't want to use words that I can't back up, but is failing our country.
It needs a radical transformation.
Absolutely. Everything needs a radical transformation.
Going back to myths, Maria, I agree with you. And personally, it exists in every sector, in every industry, and I believe has caused the problems, the wars, the loss of land that we see, that we've experienced today. And I don't see us veering away from that. The myths continue. I do think we're in an existential crisis right now, because a lot of the identity that we've built, as you said, around ourselves is based on things that were maybe true at some point, but haven't been nurtured, haven't been supported, haven't been invested in for 30 years. And so, they ultimately decline. Obviously they will. If you don't nurture something, it'll ultimately cease to exist. And so, I think the delusion caused all of these catastrophic things that have happened in recent years.
I couldn't agree more.
And I wonder, is it because we're delusional, or is it because some of it was by design? Some of it was just, meant to keep us in a certain state.
By whom?
I don't know. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist.
Sometimes.
But I do wonder if it's an easier thing to do, to continue living this myth, this lie, to profit from it.
That's easy. It's easy. Look, and I think people like ourselves, like you, myself, and many others who live and work in Armenia, we have to not allow the crazy commentary to impact us. For those of us who are living and working in Armenia, who see on the ground what is happening on a daily basis and what those kinds of myths led us to, I think we have to be much more courageous and much more forthright and call things out and say things as they are without being fearful of the verbal abuse that we oftentimes get. I know you get it. I get it. A lot of us do it. I turn it off.
Yeah.
I don't look at messages or I don't look at comments. I say what I have to say, and everybody's free to say what. Yeah. If I broadcast out to the world, then they're free to say what they want to say.
Right.
But we really have to take a step back and say, okay, so up until 2020, we were, and myself included, I'm being very vulnerable and honest, myself included, believed that our army was the most battle-capable, battle-ready army in the region. Even though I knew of all the corruption, I knew people who served in the army who said, they would send us to Artsakh, and instead of actually learning something, we would be sent to the generals' fields to, harvest their fields, or I was sent to Remont to remodel another commanding officer's home, or I was sent to Vanator and, I was reading all day, I didn't do anything, or we also know how many people paid certain people within the military so their sons wouldn't serve. We knew all of this. And yet somehow, myself included, I believed that we would win if there was a war. And then the slap in the face that we got, for me, that was another turning point. Obviously, the war for many of us was. But for me, I thought, how ridiculous are you, Maria? How ridiculous have you been to have believed when you saw and you knew and you
the facts were there.
The facts were right there. But as Armenians, maybe it's a diasporan thing. I don't know. Is it because of the way I was raised in this romantic notion of, the Armenians would be this way? So I'm just like, the gloves are off and we have to take a really hard look at what we did wrong and what happened as a result of that, and now what are we doing? We have to keep everybody's toes to the fire.
How do we get there, Maria? It's like a truth commission almost.
Yeah, maybe we do need it. Maybe we just need to come out and say things and call things out and not be afraid of the fallout. I mean, I really, at this point in my life, I really don't care. I really do. My love for my country
is greater than everything else.
Is greater than your snide little ridiculous comments under a tweet that I might do. Mm-hmm. Okay? I had a friend, being Armenian, building a country is not a spectator sport. Okay? Go watch tennis. Yeah? But if you want this country, if we want our country to become empowered, strong, to be the best it could possibly be under the circumstances that it is in, we need to really shut the F up and just work. Work the hardest we've ever worked. And, the biggest disappointment for me was after the war, when my friends or family in the diaspora or people I knew, or I was just hearing these things saying, we don't want to talk about Armenia anymore. We're so disappointed. We don't want to do anything. We're exhausted. We're fatigued. And I wanted to say, next time you're in Armenia, let me take you to a border town. Let me take you to Nerkinhand. Right? Let me take you to all of those little villages and towns that have the Artsakh and the Armenian flag in all of their cemeteries. Let me show you the cost of war, the cost of our indifference, the cost of our ridiculous romanticizing of what we are and who we were. That was the biggest loss for me is the loss of life.
Yeah.
As a mother, that is the biggest. And I think that's something that I will carry for the rest of my life. Because as a journalist, I failed. As an Armenian journalist, I failed. Mm. Because I didn't report what I should have reported. Because I was afraid.
What were you afraid of?
You don't touch the army. You don't talk about the army. You don't talk about sexual abuse. You don't talk about the church. You don't talk about, those sacred institutions, the Armenian family. Let's have a discussion about the Armenian family, shall we? Mm-hmm. It's an institution that has been, it's to the point of idolatry. Same thing with motherhood, right? The Armenian mother, right? I would say, does the Italian mother love her child less than an Armenian mother?
Not.
What are we doing? Mm-hmm. What are these games and these fantasies that we're playing? It's like, we need to grow up. Mm-hmm. We really need to grow up and say, these are the problems. Yes. And, sometimes say, I'm just one person. I can't make a change. Everybody can make a change. Everybody can make a change. And we all just need to dig our heels in, keep the authorities on their toes, and really just be honest about what the real problems are and not be afraid. I keep saying those words, but you're right.
And I think something that kept me sane and somewhat and grounded during these last 5 years, managing an organization that was very much entrenched and everything that was happening was directly impacted. Seeing our youth, like the best people you can imagine straight out of university, young professionals who applied in the highest numbers possible to go work in Nerkinhand and Artsakh and all these different places post-war. I mean, these are the things that still keep me going.
Hopeful. Yeah,
and keep me hopeful because they're not they're not talking much. They're just doing a lot of great things. You know?
Because, you know, the people who do the best work are the ones who don't talk.
Yeah.
They just do, they keep their head let down and they do the work. There's no chest bumping going on.
I agree. And one thing that, you know, I just keep thinking about is I grew up in Russia. You know, I know this style of politics and oligarchy and I think, you know, when we look at what, you know, the Aliyev regime has been doing, lots of corruption, obviously, lots of caviar diplomacy, wildly strategic. I was telling someone a story recently that I was a college student in northern Wisconsin, and they had funded a Native American student group to
Azerbaijan.
To go against any and all things and statements that I would make about the genocide, even with, you know, in 1915. It was amazing. That was 20 years ago. You know, anyway, my question is, I think there are also examples of authoritarian regimes that are obviously horrible for human expression and freedom of choice, and there's no democracy there. But these people, these politicians, have also had something that was important to them beyond the corruption, beyond making money. Like in Aliyev's case, for example, you know, he built his mansions, he impoverished his nation, but he built his army.
Sure.
At the same time. And so
what were we doing?
And like my question is, okay, we've had these same issues in the last decades after the fall of the Soviet Union, but why didn't we have something that was genuinely important for us, especially when I think about, you know, the people who were political leaders after the fall of the Union. Many of them were generals. Many of them were military people. These were people who should have at least found this one thing to be sacred. Forget education, forget healthcare, science, anything else.
But the military.
And so why did that, like, what happened there?
You're asking me.
Yeah, I mean, from your perspective, I mean, it's...
Yeah, no, first of all, for the last 20 years or so, while we were saying we're going to go have tea in Baku, and we were praising ourselves and patting ourselves on the back and really not doing anything strategically or tactically impactful for the military, Aliyev was building his army. He was putting a lot of money toward it because he had a goal. His goal was to take Artsakh back, right? And I don't know, we didn't have intelligence, we didn't have security experts, we didn't have military experts, we didn't have people with common sense to know that this is going to be the case. So in 1994, you signed the Bishkek Protocol, you put a ceasefire, and then what? And then what did we do? What did we do in Artsakh? What did we do with the liberated territories? What did we do with them? No, honestly, has anybody gone to the liberated territories? Was there any development done in those liberated territories? The only people that
went to the liberated territories were some of our Armenian teachers. Nothing else was happening there.
Well, yeah, so you know, right? Well, so, and then I remember a politician said once, we can economically become a powerhouse despite our blockade, despite everything. And I thought,
how? Okay, cool.
Please explain this to me. Please explain this to me, okay? So while Aliyev was building his army, while he was spewing anti-Armenian hatred, while he was preparing his population for war, and in 2016, the 4-day war...
That was a glimpse.
It wasn't a glimpse. It was a big freaking sign that something was coming. That something big was coming. Yeah? What did we do? I just want to ask this question. What did we do?
Well, we also declined a lot of things in that moment. We won't go there right now, but
so
this is going to turn into a big conspiracy theory.
Oh, that's fine. And then we said, that the Azeris won't fight, the Azeris won't do this, the Armenian military would be able to withstand anything. Well, the skies were full of drones when our boys were in trenches.
With guns.
With guns. So these are the kinds of questions we need to ask and not be fearful of asking.
And why are we
and
not
people will say,
asking
oh,
that?
but stop going to the, stop talking about the past.
Yeah.
Let's talk about now and the future. But you can't determine now. You can't forge a path without understanding your horrendous mistakes, the egregious behavior that our leaders had. We cannot until we figure that out. You're right, a truth commission. Maybe we just need to lay everything out on the table and call it.
Yeah. So. I mean,
after this podcast, I don't know what's going to happen.
Any other industry does that. I mean, you look at the investment financial industry, they look at historical data to predict the present and the future.
Right. So we just, in order so that we don't make that mistake again. Because you're right, we didn't invest in education. We didn't invest in healthcare. We didn't invest in social welfare. We didn't invest in infrastructure. Right? We said all of the money has to go toward building the army. Did you build the army? Did you? Mm-hmm. We can talk about now too. I mean, this is not a
No, it's not. Yeah, it's. You're right. Yeah. You're right. So
I thought this was supposed to be about journalism, but anyway.
Well, I mean, but that's I guess if we do go back to journalism, which I want to do, how do you grapple with this thing that you said earlier, which was I was scared to report on these things? Like, how do you address that now at EVN Report?
I'm still, I can't say that I'm not, scared isn't the word maybe. I'm careful, cautious. Because the big thing for me is to do no harm. Right? The way we were reporting during the war or afterward, it was always about to do no harm. I don't think I'm doing enough. I hope to get there. I'm still growing up and learning, if you know what I mean. But I think we have to be much more forthright and not be fearful of writing about the things that led us to where we are today. Everything from self-censorship is the worst thing ever. To censor yourself, to censor your voice, to mute your voice because you're afraid of a backlash. I think we need to overcome that. I think I have in many ways. I still have a way to go, to be very frank with you. But we have to talk about what happened in the past. And we have to talk about what's going on now. The failure of institutional reforms in the country. This, the domestic political, almost ridiculous circus that we're in. The way people talk to one another, the way they address issues. I remember after the Velvet Revolution, I was doing an interview with the new government, and I was doing an interview with Arat Mirzoyan. I think he was deputy prime minister then or whatever. So I went, and he's talking about what they did and what they accomplished. I said, that's great. I said, when are you going to stop being an activist and become a statesman? And he looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? I go, it's great. You led the people to a revolution. You didn't complete the revolution. That's a whole other conversation we can have. But when you walk into the role of a statesman or statesperson, or you walk into the role of the office of prime minister or foreign minister or health minister, whatever it happens to be, you are no longer an activist. You have to apply. You have to be able to make some very difficult choices and make difficult decisions that are not going to be popular in order to fix the institutions that you claim to want to fix. And they didn't do that because they were afraid. I think this fear has...
It's fear-based decision-making. I mean, I think you're totally right. At least I think in a very similar way. The hope was that would happen in the first 6 months to a year. That's when these things have to happen. Right. After
I remember there was a delegation here right after the revolution, and I can't remember who they were and in what context I was in that meeting. We've been in so many meetings. It's, and he said, you have 2 years until things go to shit. Well, within a year, we had COVID, and then we had the war, and then everything else that happened after the war, the loss of Artsakh, and, the ethnic displacement of our people from Artsakh.
Concurrently, the same thing happened, obviously, in the Artsakh government. I remember, I won't mention who I was talking to, but after the first war, and we had this 5-year period with the Russian peacekeepers there, and I said, I think I can get like real support to help reform the most important institutional bodies in Artsakh, so we can at least have a semblance of a chance of somehow changing the situation there. And the answer was no.
Why?
Well, because fear. It was the same thing. It's the same thing, and I think it's a disease. And I think it could have also not worked. It's not a guarantee.
Sure, but you have to try.
You can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result,
Yeah, we're good at that.
Yeah, and so very disappointing. And when you try to talk about it, it's you're the Davajan, you're the betrayer. You hate this country. You hate these institutions.
No. The best is that you're a Western agent. You're a foreign
Sorosakan.
You're a
Yes.
Sorosakan.
Yeah.
I've been called that for a while.
I've been telling people I really tried to get money from Soros.
Me too. I didn't try, but I never got
for in the early years because we needed money so bad. We still do, but I tried and it was always a no. So there you go. How would you say the media landscape has changed, gotten better, worsened?
Since when?
I think we know what it was up until the revolution. It was controlled,
sure.
And it was
okay. Let me look.
But then CivilNet was
look.
around.
I worked under Kocharyan and Sarkisyan and now Pashinyan as a journalist. Right. I worked at different media outlets. I have never been fearful of my life. I have never come under severe pressure. Some, but not too much. We don't need to talk about everything. But the Armenian press was always relatively free. It was just never independent, right? And this is a very important nuance to understand that, we could basically say whatever we wanted against Kocharyan or Sarkisyan or Pashinyan. They didn't give you much credence, especially because we were English language or whatever. But it has never been independent. This has been the problem. Most of the media in Armenia has been controlled either by the oligarchy, by political forces, or by pro-government, right? There are very few independent. There are hardly any independent. And today, there's only a handful of independent news organizations that have no direct correlation with financial backing by a political party or an oligarch. So the problem is the information space is so cluttered. It's hard for independent media to be able to function in a way that gets the message to the masses. We also have to realize that, up until the dissolution of the Soviet Union, there was no such thing. We don't have a legacy or a history of a free and independent press, right? Up until 1991. After that, unfortunately, the media was always weaponized. It was used by different political forces, and that's how they controlled, the discourse. Today, I would argue that we don't have responsible journalism in the country. I would argue that independent voices are the space for them is narrowing. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, manipulation of the news. I read something the other day was called, what was it called? Propaganda, like sloppy propaganda. There's, we're heading into elections in 2026. So we're going to see a lot of, hybrid warfare happening in the media space. We're already seeing media organizations all of a sudden crop up with lots of funding. And, all of us who are in the media know how hard it is to raise money, to have funding, to keep your operation going. So when a news organization comes into the media space and has hired 90 people and it has, I don't know, a whole building to itself, and then you find out where the funding is coming from, then you understand that the Russian propaganda machine is going to go hard and heavy. And so we have to compete against that in the country. I
always thought media should disclose.
Should what?
Disclose that this is funded by
Oh,
X.
absolutely. Oh, I thought you said just close, and I thought
no. Well, if I was prime minister.
Listen, according to Armenian legislation, every news organization has to disclose their financial sources. Okay, this was never implemented, and Pashinyan's government at one point started to push this, and people were like, "Oh, the government is trying to suppress the media." I'm saying, "Hang on a second, guys.
This is the opposite.
This is not suppressing the media." On EVN Report, when you go to our website, there's a page where it clearly shows where we get our funding from. I have nothing to hide. If you don't agree with my position or my editorial sort of vision,
that's fine.
That's fine. Go read, I don't know, go read whatever you want. But media, because as a reader, if we come, look, I'm going to jump a bit. If we come to media literacy, right, Armenian in general, we have low levels of media literacy in the country. So when they're using Facebook as a news source and they're seeing something and they click on the link, they need to go and see the About Us section. They need to see who wrote the article. They need to see what their editorial guidelines are, and they need to see where their financial sources are. Now, who's going to do that, really? The average person isn't going to spend the time to do that. But unfortunately today, if we want to be informed citizens, this is what we have to do. Most news organizations in Armenia don't have an About Us section. They don't have where they're getting their financial their resources from. When you click on a link, it sometimes is just, Larisa Hovannisian said this on her Facebook page, and they consider that to be a news item. Or there's no author, there's no reporter's name of who wrote the article. Right? I want to know what their bias is, right? If you click on their name, it doesn't take you anywhere. It's not clickable. So it's very opaque, and it's sensationalized, manipulated news for political purposes and political gain. This is the media landscape today. And, I don't want to blame the reporters. They have to make a living, and if their editor tells them to cover this case in this particular framing with this angle, that's what they're going to do. The question that we need to ask ourselves as a society is, what kind of media do we want to have in the country? And as media, as editors, we have to ask ourselves, what is my role and responsibility to my country? Really, what is my role? Without a free information space, an independent information space, government steps in, oligarchic powers step in, external players step in, and then all of a sudden the people are like they're in a tornado almost, right? They don't know what to believe. And then what happens? We give into conspiracy theories, or we tend to believe personal relationships, right? Like my godfather told me, or my mother-in-law told me, or my father told me, therefore it is the truth. When I hear some of the crazy things people say, and I'm like, where did you hear this? Like, did you question?
About anyone.
Yeah. Just look at things a little critically.
I know.
Ask questions all the time. Do not take anything at face value. Look at our material critically.
Yes, please look at our material critically.
You know what I mean?
But it becomes super personalized.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
When you think about our media strategy when it comes to more of a global narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We suck at strategic communication.
Yeah.
The government is terrible at it. I think a lot of the problems in our country is because of poor communication from state authorities about things that are happening, from demarcation and delimitation to bilateral negotiations with Azerbaijan. I understand that there are certain things that can't be said to the public. We're not that naive. But I also understand that they need to communicate with the public what is actually happening and what that means. this whole demarcation and delimitation process that happened in Davos that led to the protests with the archbishop leading people walking because they didn't want to delimit or demarcate the border. Why was it not communicated to the Armenian population by demarcating and delimiting our borders? This can contribute to a heightened security for those border regions. Why did they not do this in a proper way? Why don't they talk about the reform process that they're doing? Let's see what they're really doing. Why aren't they talking about these things, right? Like we talk about how Armenia is, moving away from the CSTO, moving away from Russia. Explain why. Explain why.
Instead, I'm scrolling Twitter, now X, and see a New York Post which headlines a quote, from the prime minister to our Catholicos about private parts and so on and so forth. And I'm like,
you have an issue with the
glad.
church leadership. I have no problem, right? If you have an issue with the church leadership, it is the rhetoric that is being used, the method that's being used that is incomprehensible and unacceptable. Unacceptable. This is not the way to function. When it's like not to sound, maybe this is politically incorrect. I don't even know what's politically correct.
You're not known to be.
No, I'm not. That's why I would never be a diplomat or a politician. It's like some third world dictator's comments that are being, that stop it. I wanted to say, someone take his phone away from him, please. And then the other thing, there was an article in a Spanish newspaper that everybody was talking about this so-called, scenic route and how the Americans are going to come in. And according to the Spanish periodical, the Americans were going to lease it for 99 years. There was going to be 1,000-person strong American presence. Like, it was so much fabrication.
Really?
So much fabrication.
Interesting. Even I was like, okay, I guess this is happening.
No. So all you needed to do was to ask ChatGPT. Sorry, I'm going to say this Spanish periodical is known as a tabloid. It's yellow journalism. It's paid journalism, right? They'll write whatever you want them to write. And so our political leadership, not our government necessarily. So let me rephrase that. So the intellectuals of Armenia, right? The political commentators, the analysts, different political forces took us. You see, we're giving up our sovereignty. Nobody stopped to ask, is this newspaper credible? Mm-hmm. Are these facts checked? Is this actually what is happening? And then you have like dead silence from the government or something else that, throws people off. Clear communication is the most important thing. It's the most important thing in a family, in a relationship, in an organization, in an enterprise.
I always tell my team, if you don't create the narrative about
somebody
our
else,
work,
somebody else will.
Yeah.
And that's so they leave these openings for other people to come in, swoop in, and then hijack the narrative. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't matter how much you try to fix it. The impression has already been sealed. Mm-hmm. in people's minds, right? Mm-hmm. So strategic communication, terrible. How we position ourselves in the world. How do we position ourselves in the world, Larisa? I remember there was a Brazilian journalist who came to Armenia, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, and we were at a restaurant. She goes, I don't understand you people. She goes, the first thing you want to tell everybody about yourselves is the genocide, that you were victims of genocide. She goes, but I went to your museums and I went to the Modena Taran and I saw this beauty and this rich cultural legacy, and yet, you're fixated on the genocide. Of course we have to be fixated on the genocide. We're all products of the genocide. Unfortunately, the reason I grew up in the diaspora is a direct result of the genocide. But we have to show the world something else as well. They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
I agree. And what she said is very much similar to what my foreign friends have said. Mm. I've had a colleague who was not Armenian, who moved to Armenia and worked with us at TFA for 5 years. And he kept saying the same thing over and over again. Those two things can be true at the same time. Sure. And the way Armenians position themselves is not strategic, at the very least. Mm-hmm. Or we host conferences and panels and we talk to each other about our own problems, and we're just in such a vacuum, in such an echo chamber, and we're siloed from the world. And We expect people to care about these things. But when other horrific things happen to other people,
What have we done about Gaza?
we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it, you know, and it sucks because it's almost like a double standard. Why do you expect for us to do that when we don't?
And plus, why does the world owe us anything? I mean, you're gonna care for yourself, and you're gonna empower your institutions. You're gonna empower your army. You're gonna secure your borders. You're gonna improve the education system. You know, we talk about the tech sector and all of that. You know, it's a very fluid sector. It's constantly changing. Are we keeping up with that? We published an article, the myths about Armenia's tech sector.
I saw that. Yeah.
You know, we have to be very honest. So, you know, we just like to rest on our laurels all the time and think, you know, somebody's going to come and nobody's going to come and save us. Nobody is going to come and save us.
I think it's a generational passed down psychological state, to be honest, of victimhood.
Maybe we need group therapy.
Victimhood. Yeah, I do think that. I think it's very much perpetuated in our songs.
Oh my goodness.
In our
literature,
in our educational system. And when you talk about that, at least in the educational system, especially with diasporans, it's like you as an educator, as someone who understands child psychology, there are times, the appropriate times and ways in which these things need to be taught and talked about. And it can be taught and talked about in a way that doesn't derive this innate feeling of I am a victim, which is so important for us to think about because kids will grow up.
Yes.
Will grow up with this psychological...
We're 5-6 generations out from the genocide.
Yes. And it's still, you know, you can acknowledge and understand and know very well your history and what has happened to you, but not let that define where you are now and moving forward. I think a lot of it has to be reviewed in terms of how we, you know.
It's about holding the mirror up to our face again, right?
Exactly,
so
exactly.
We're going around in circles, but that is the main thing, is to understand what our shortcomings are, to you know, to really say this is what we want to be when we grow up. You know, when I first came, everyone was saying, "Oh, we're a transitional country, I go, "Okay, but where are we transitioning to? Like, what is the goal for Armenia? How do we see ourselves in the world? How do we see ourselves in the region? How do we see ourselves, you know, for our babies and our children and future generations?" We talk about democracy. What kind of democracy do we want? Do we, you know, so many conversations that need to happen and yet don't. So we have Dolma festivals and we have water festivals and we have all of these things which are really lovely and part of, you know, whatever, maybe soft power, if you will. But for me, it's about building institutions. It's about reforming important sectors of our countries.
It's about building leverage.
Yeah.
Value for the world.
And showing that, you know, a small, struggling, transitional democracy is trying to get a foothold and is trying to build. If that's what we want, that's what I want. I want Armenia to be a democracy where human life is valued, where there are human rights and freedom of expression and freedom to develop, to become, you know, free economy. I want all of those things for my country. If you don't agree with me, that's fine, but tell me what you're doing.
Yeah, what's your plan?
Yeah, that's my plan. We don't agree, that's fine. People, we're afraid to disagree. We just yell at each other.
I know. It's a tough situation we're in. But as you look to the next 5 to 10 years.
As I look to the next one?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay.
I know we're not going to we don't have a coffee cup that we can read right now to tell the future, but you know, what do you see from your perspective as, you know, the founder of EVN Report, a journalist, a mother, a grandmother who's, you know, spent her life here really in the darkest of days too. What do you see for us moving forward?
if we don't address very honestly the challenges that we have, not external challenges, I'm talking about internal challenges that we have as a people. If we don't address those honestly, I'm not very hopeful that we will avert or mitigate future conflicts, because everything starts from us. I think we need to have honest conversations about our failures. I think we need to have honest conversations about the failure of this current government, and how do we build a stronger nation. A friend of mine wrote a piece called Fortress Armenia. How do we build a fortress? How do we make Armenia a fortress that will protect its citizens? So for me, the most important thing is security. The most important thing is rebuilding our army, securing our borders, and making sure that the armed forces will never again be subject to the kind of corruption and the kind of misuse of resources that it was in the past. For me, the education system is extremely, extremely important. As a citizen of Armenia and as a mother, I realize how important, I know intrinsically how important a proper education is. I really believe we can achieve that. I do, because the resilience of our people is outstanding. People would complain when I first moved. Armenia's like, I go, just think about it. 88 earthquake, the Karabakh movement, the collapse of a 70-year-old system, an energy crisis, right? Complete blockade, the collapse of every institution, the collapse of the currency, huge outmigration, right? Just think about everything that this people have been through, and we're still here, right? And then after that, of course, came many, many more challenges. And, after the war and then the ethnic cleansing, and then we've just, I want to stop having to be resilient. I just want to be able to breathe and live in a country that I'm so proud of. So how do we stop these things? We stop by rebuilding. We're at ground zero right now, if you ask me. Yes, you can come to Yerevan and it's lovely, and there's cafes and restaurants and people everywhere and tourists, and you go to the monasteries and feel the presence of history. Tell me what's happening on my borders. Tell me what's happening with my armed forces. Tell me how we're fixing certain institutions. How are we responsible for ourselves? Tell me that, and then I'll say in 5 to 10 years, we will have a country that will still have many challenges, but has a bright future. I know that sounds very idealistic and optimistic, but I really believe Armenia.
It's in the realm of possibility.
Absolutely. It's bullshit when people say it's not possible. It is totally possible that Armenia could be the strongest country in the region. Why can't it be? But really, why can't it be? We haven't allowed
ourselves to think this way.
No, but we think in grandiose terms. We don't think about rational, real, concrete steps that need to be taken, sometimes very painful decisions that need to be taken, sometimes very unpopular decisions that need to be taken. We need to take those decisions, and we have to stop being cowards. I don't know.
I love that.
Yeah, maybe people are going to get upset that I said cowards, but sometimes I think we are too fearful of ourselves, of what people are going to think about us, about how it's going to impact, their lives. But if I only think about myself, look, I didn't need to move to Armenia. I really didn't. Neither did you. Neither did a lot of people. I could have stayed in Canada, had a relatively comfortable life. Didn't have to think about, I could have had my beer and watched, the hockey game on Saturday night, right? Like most people do in Canada. But there's love of country. There's something that it's your place on the planet. It's, how you say you're my person. Well, Armenia is my person.
What you said, it's been an honor. It's been an honor.
It's an honor and a privilege. Total privilege and honor. And I do check my privilege as well. I realize that I'm privileged as a diasporan to be living in Armenia. I am privileged every single day, and it has been the greatest honor of my life.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for changing the game for us here when it comes to many things, but especially I think one of the most important in this day and age areas of our society, which is media and how we not only do that in the country, but also what it's going to take for us to be on a completely different level when we think outside of our borders too, in terms of our narratives and our stories and delivering clear, articulate communication about where we were, where we are, and where we want to go. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. And onward, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Larisa, for everything that you do. And, we are comrades in this. I know that sounds awfully strange, but it's that camaraderie and that solidarity that will push us forward. So thank you.
Thanks.